The 2024 World Chess Championship continues. We just saw the conclusion of game number 12. There are only 2 games remaining in the match, but let's get into what happened today. So first of all, most importantly, Ding has the white pieces, and we all know what happened in the last game. Ding took a loss, which means the pressure's on, right? He has to get a win at some point. Counting this game, there are 3 total games remaining. So let's see how he started this one off. He came out with the move c4, and this move leaves a lot of flexibility. Anything could really happen from here. We could transpose back into d4 positions. Kind of depends on Gukesh's response, and the response being e6 is interesting because we did see some c4 e5 happening in this match already. So instead, c4 e6 indicates the move d5 is probably on the way, and Ding wanted to react to that with g3 bishop g2, something that we have also seen before. And what I found interesting after the next couple moves, knight f6, knight f3, sort of a Catalan setup here, was that we saw the move d4. And although it's not a direct transposition, not at all, it is reminiscent of the game that we just watched, right? Last round. It was actually Gukesh who had a position with e3 and b4 playing white, and Ding, on the other hand, was playing black and played c5, knight c6. And we were talking about those reverse Benoni positions, and we've kind of got one again. So it's almost like Ding said, hey, that opening yesterday, it's kind of successful. I'm going to do it too. So let's see how you handle it. So castling, knight c6. Notice a clear absence of the c-pawn. I think it is a kind of well-known fact that if you can forego the move c5, or for white, it would be the move c4 in a Benko Benoni type structure, it's kind of a good thing. Basically, this pawn, while useful, you can do away with it and use that extra move for something else. Like, for example, the bishop can actually use that square now, e5, castling, something like that. So knight c6 does make some sense here. E5 is the intended next move. Ding plays e3 right away. You don't really want to give black time to set up everything perfectly. That being said, I was interested in the move e5 here. I was wondering why maybe we didn't see it, but I think it's just a move order thing. Black could play the move e5 now, and it would be more or less the same. If you take here, okay, rook e1, d3. White's probably trying to get that b4 move in once again. So it's not the most comfortable, but sometimes in these positions, you actually see the move e4 being played. And it's kind of hard to remember when this move actually works and doesn't. At this point, I would say this is probably too risky for, especially given the match situation, someone like Gukesh. I'm not sure I'd venture into this, but e4 with the idea to take back like this. White plays knight g5. You're going to be down a pawn here as black, but you get a really, really nice, easy development, castling, and then the knight is like unbelievably strong on d4. And white's not really developed. So there's potential there, but definitely understand the move bishop e7. I'm more used to seeing e5, but this one makes sense. d3, and he decides to take. At this point, if you don't take, clearly this pawn is, at least it's a consideration to capture there. Let's say black castles, and we have all these captures. Let's say knight c3, bishop e3 being the next move. The bishops are really strong in this position. Even a move like rook d8, it seems like black is getting out of trouble here because the d3 pawn can't be defended. But even bishop e3 takes, and something like queen b3 with rook d1 I've even seen here. Actually, even stronger might be the, I was thinking just queen b3 with some rook d1 move coming and just a lot of pressure on the position. I think this is more than fine, but I mean, this is why we have engines, right? Knight d5 is something I certainly wasn't prepared to to mention, but knight d5, even better, right? Basically the same position plus the bishop pair here. So stuff like that, you know, already gives you cause for concern. So d takes e3 played by Gukesh, and you know, bishop takes e3, e5. Clearly the move d4 is a problem. I mean, if you castle and allow d4, I don't know. Maybe you don't rush into it here as white. I'm just kind of nervous about knight g4, although maybe we can just ignore it. But knight c3, okay, you'd have to play e5. I'm convinced that this is the way to go, just d4. There's a reason that black played e5 there. Gukesh did not want to allow the pawn to get up to d4. So stopping it with e5, knight c3, castles, and have a look at the clock once again. Gukesh, an hour 56 minutes. Yes, we started at 2 hours. And for Ding, we're down to an hour and 23 minutes. And after h6, a3, down to an hour and 6. So, you know, just painting the picture here, a lot of people read into Ding's time usage. Personally, I do not. And I think that comes from the fact that I also play like this, even in classical chess. I think a lot, way too much. Definitely wasteful with my time. Probably spending time calculating variations I do not need to be. I don't know what it is, but obviously I'm relating super hard to Ding's time usage, and for that reason, I don't really read into it. I don't think he's more uncomfortable because of you know, certain time usage. It's just how he plays. A3 intending b4 will almost always get the reaction a5. This is not only just a good move in this specific position, but in this specific opening, or anytime you even see a move like this, the move a5 is a very, very good reaction. You'll see that all the time, even in positions in the Sicilian when black plays c5 and then plays a6, b5 coming, white often plays a4. It's a very standard reaction, and it does really help out stopping the b4 move here. h3. I'm a huge fan of this move. The move knight g4, I've already mentioned, has been bothering me. The bishop looks really comfortable on e3, and I like having both of these squares covered to make it feel even more safe. So big fan of h3. It also stops bishop g4, and in the case of bishop f5 in the future, I kind of like having g4 on hand. It hits the bishop, gains some space, might be useful. So big fan of h3 here. White kind of has the time. I know Ding's clock is kind of suffering here, but I wouldn't say this is a must-win game, but I know Ding's clock is down, but I do think he's given himself a position that he can work with. Probably slightly better here. He's got the d4 push for later, and he's just kind of playing normal, bringing the pieces to the middle of the board, waiting for black to commit development, and in general, white has the d4 push. So white gets to decide, am I going to open things up or not? Am I going to push or not? I don't really see any dangerous ideas from black. There's no breaks really for black. Bishop e6 makes sense. King h2, more of like a waiting type of move. It will be very useful to defend this, don't get me wrong. Like the move queen d7 and rook d8 is hitting h3 and then hitting the d pawn. So let's say you played something slightly more careless like rook c1, then I would be looking at queen d7, hitting this. Oh, we have to defend. And then rook d8, probably use this rook even, hitting the d pawn, and you have to defend that. And obviously bishop f1 is very undesirable here, and black would, you know, be doing very well with all the development and the tempi. So understandable playing king h2, getting ahead of it all, so that if we see queen d7, we can react accordingly, probably with like queen c2 to get a rook to d1. Rook b8 played, guarding the pawn so that in the future, maybe some knight d4, that pawn is actually now supported. And queen c2. So queen c2, I thought this was one of the last moments that Gukesh had to play the move knight d4, because, I mean, knight d4 is screaming here. It's hitting the queen. This is probably the last chance because white's going rook d1 and maybe d4 himself. So why not knight d4? It was not played in the game. Knight d4 surely will capture it, and not with the knight, which would lose a piece immediately, but takes this way. Knight b5, where else? Hitting the pawn, which means that although black would love to play c6, I think black has to play c5. You could also use the bishop with bishop c5, but I do think that would be slightly worse. White has a lot of interesting moves like rook e5, b4, doubling the rooks. I don't really know how this bishop is staying on this diagonal. Rook e5 looks particularly strong. Yes, b6 can be played, but it also leads me into my next thought, which is whether it's bishop c5 or c5. Look, I'm sure this is not the move that's about to be played in the World Championship, but I'm a big fan of rook takes e6. I really like this move. You get opposite bishops. You have a super strong knight on b5. You have the rook swinging over, the knight into e5. I like this position. Now, of course, I like this position too, so it's not necessary to take. Maybe white can just double up with the rooks like this. Knight e5, pretty much the same idea. The knight is just as strong on b5 whether I sack or not. But the point is that the engine does not even dislike this move. So it just goes to show you how strong white's position is. Although black has the two bishops, this powerful knight, strong bishop, and the control of the e-file means that white's actually doing very, very well here. So Gukesh was not interested in a position like that. Instead, he's kind of keeping it solid, keeping it simple, rook e8. But white's position, I would argue, the move a3, so useful. The move h3, so useful. King h2, necessary. I just feel like white's waiting moves here have been much better than black's waiting moves. Knight b5, he's going there anyway. Ding is stopping the move knight d4 now, and this is pretty much just as strong as if the pawn was on c5, because black can't play c6 anyway. The knight on c6 is stuck there, can't do anything, so we see bishop f5, easy move for Ding here, guarding the central pawn. And knight d7, I mean, at this point I'm trying to figure out what to even recommend for black, because as I said, white's moves are actually, I can feel them improving the position, and I can't say the exact same for black. I'd love to play c6, but I just can't move the knight. It's just not possible. Not only would it maybe drop the pawn, but I literally have no place to move it. It just can't go anywhere. So queen d7 to me is the only other very logical move, maybe to play rook d8. But you got to wonder, why wouldn't Gukesh play queen d7, rook d8 instead of rook b8? Clearly that's not his plan. So if he goes here, first of all, there's no threat on the h3 pawn, thanks to that king move earlier. White will most likely move the queen out of the pin, because the whole plan is to play d4, and finally it looks like white's pieces are ready. Look at every piece pretty much working together, ready to play the move d4. And this one also hits the e-pawn, which is nice. It just feels like Ding is miles ahead in terms of achieving a plan here in the middle game. So rook d1, knight d7. We can see maybe bishop to c5 or knight c5 is the intended move. Ding is keeping it simple with queen d2, getting out of the pin, and there's pretty much nothing you can do to stop d4 now. It's a guaranteed move. I think Ding has been playing very well. He's down on the clock, but I think we're going to see that start to reverse, as we have, by the way, throughout the entire match. Ding, in the opening phase, even in the middle game phase, this has been a regular occurrence, but if he gets his positions, Gukesh often, has the time swing back in Ding's favor near the end. So bishop g6, this is a move that tells Ding, full steam ahead, because look at black's position, like barely even having the majority of the pieces off the 8th rank at this point. D4 is happening. This has been so far a masterclass by Ding, but not in any special. I don't think he's made any moves that are unbelievable, but I think he navigated himself to a position which is phenomenal, because all the slow, simple waiting moves and development moves have really improved the position, while the same quality of move for black's position has not yielded the same effect. And sometimes those are positions that you work with your team and yourself to actually, you seek them out. If you can find a position where the human instinct, basic, simple, developed, logical move, if those moves and both sides play them and it just works its way up to an advantage for white, that means you found probably a very, very strong position, because it means that black probably needed to play more specifically. So if you find a position in chess where you can play the average move or the most logical human move, and that's exactly what the position needs, thumbs up. That's a very easy position to play. If your opponent, on the other hand, for their position, has the exact same thing, that's probably the Berlin or something like that. Like, it's something very simple. Both sides know, and it's just going to be a draw. But in this case, the exact same simple human logical moves, it feels like Gukesh is playing them, and yet the result is not the same. So very interesting preparation potentially there. We see d4, onwards and upwards. d4 is a super strong move, opens up the center. I mean, we can look at pawn takes on d4, but I'm sure Gukesh did not spend too much time looking at this. This is just super unpleasant. The move knight takes d4 is extremely strong here. So let's start with that. This move already is a problem for Ding. Now, black might have some ways around this to navigate the position, maybe target this c pawn with knight e5. The even stronger move here, and certainly the one that Ding would have no trouble playing, is the move bishop to f4. This move just ties the rook down again to the c pawn with rook c8. It's very hard to imagine that a different move gets played, and then white could take back here, and that extra tempo of bringing the rook here is going to bring the rook away from the b7 pawn. White's pieces are all over the position. This is just crushing. So Gukesh plays e4, tries to seal things up. Yes, white loses time with knight g1, but the knight is rejoining to, by the way, a fantastic f4 square, and Gukesh can barely find any places for his pieces here. They're all dominated. This bishop just watching its own pawn. Knight b6, queen c3, guarding pretty much the first threat that black was able to make this game. Bishop f6 and queen c2. So even when I was watching, I was like, wait, queen c3, queen c2, what's the point of this? Why not queen c2 right away? And even now, I mean, I don't think I have the full answer for you. Queen c3, queen c2 doesn't really feel like a big deal to me. Having the bishop on f6. To me, this one looked slightly more logical. But truly, I just don't think this is a big problem. The one thing I can say is that Ding may have been happy to see this move because he did not have to deal with the move f5. Bishop blocks that pawn. Now this pawn will be a target that, you know, needs to be defended by pieces. Having the pawn there and maybe getting the bishop back to f7 was something small that Gukesh maybe could have aspired. Maybe even f5 right now, for example. So instead of playing this, where, you know, maybe f5 is encouraged, not sure, he just goes queen c3. So I'm still, to be honest, not fully understanding the differences, the nuances. This is, you know, high level stuff between these two moves. They both look great though, and it looks like a position where white's not in a rush. Black's position is not improving. Like, oh, if black plays this one move, then they're totally fine. No, it's nothing like that. So whether or not we fully understand queen c3, queen c2, or queen c2 immediately, doesn't matter. White's advantage remains the same. a4. Stopping b3, I can definitely understand that. A4 is a nice way to fix the pawns. It also makes way for the knight to a5, and d5 is a move that's about to disrupt this knight entirely. So I understand a4, and also, let's be clear, black is lacking things to do. I've been saying that the entire game, so a4 is just another thing to do. Knight e2. Every single time that we have a move for white, I feel great about the move. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. I know which piece to improve. I know why we're doing it, and I know where it's going. For black, I'm looking at the position, and I'm thinking, I don't have a move. Don't really know which piece I want to. Okay, I'll go a4. It doesn't really improve any of my pieces. Okay, maybe it has an idea to go here. That's it. The thought process is totally different, and the quality of the moves is noticeable. Bishop g5. Black's cramped. Gukesh is looking for a trade. Very understandable here. And after this move, I guess I could have mentioned even on this move, but right around here, I can finally say, of course, Gukesh is now down on time. Understandable. The position is one that, honestly, Gukesh has not been able to make good moves in quickly. It's very uncomfortable. Ding, on the other hand, has been breezing through the last 10 moves, I bet. Knight f4, and guess what? It had to be taken. Can you really allow bishop h7 to be played here? At this point, black's pieces are all in trouble. A sample line after bishop h7 is c5. Where is this knight going? I mean, there are some pitiful squares available. We've got d5, d6 coming next, and most importantly, Knight d5 is just not it. c7 is hanging, and so that will be the end of the game. So black decides to take, but Gukesh is not happy doing this. He knows he's probably lost here. Takes back. Yes, you want to play e3, but there is a slight problem. For example, if you go e3, you have to remember that the pawn is hanging on c7. So let's say the queen has to move, right? We're being hit. I'm just going to go queen c3 for now. Pawn takes f2. Pretty much have to do. White doesn't need to do anything other than the very simple rook f1. You can recapture the pawn next turn. This pawn is hanging, and the move d5, the move c5, both moves are going to arrive on the board. Looks incredibly uncomfortable for Gukesh. I don't see how he survives here. So instead, he just guards the pawn like this, but obviously Ding is now going to step out of any danger here, and I guarantee these two moves are pretty much going to be his next ones. Probably the move d5 first, though, would be my guess. So Gukesh decides to just get ahead of it with the move knight b8, and we see d5. Now, the reason I'm pointing out d5 here is because knight b8 is already, this is already a moment where knight a7 can be played. So at this point, the game is already over. You already know that Ding is going to win this game when you have Gukesh playing a move like this with 8 minutes on the clock that allows knight a7. Knight a7 just wins the exchange. That's it. Okay? So when you see something like that, you already know. Gukesh knows his position is terrible. Ding is just dominating this game. He plays d5. He doesn't even want it. Queen d7, d6. I mean, knight b8, knight a7. I'm actually, to be honest, in a world championship match, I'm surprised. Like, how do you not take the material? I would be kicking myself if I didn't win this game. And early on, I had a moment to just straight up take very valuable material. And by the way, white doesn't compromise anything by doing this. Nothing. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to take the material because I'm going to lose the bishop pair, or I'm going to ruin my pawn structure, or I'm going to give up a pawn, or lose the initiative. No, white keeps every single one of those things and gets to have the material too. So d5, that's quite the move, because look, there's nothing wrong with d5. I do think objectively it might be worse than just taking the material, but he knows that Gukesh just can't play this position. And that's not a dig at Gukesh. That's a comment on the position. This position is not playable. Like, black has nothing to do here. Bishop is terrible on g6. Knight is undeveloped on b8. There's nothing to do. And he would rather play this position than win the exchange. So I don't know. That's a big decision from Ding, but, you know, can't throw any criticism his way for this particular game. He snags that extra pawn in the middle of the board, but at this point, time is down under 10 minutes for both players. We're on move 30, so there's still many moves to go, but every single move that you're going to see here from Ding is just going to be a good one, whether or not it's the best one, and every move from Gukesh is a struggle to get off. Like, knight d5, for example, what do you do? Like, are you playing knight a8? Of course, he takes it, but after pawn takes, it's just so simple. The pawn is dropping. This bishop is guarding this pawn. If the bishop moves back, trying to play g5 to get the bishop away from the pawn, I've always got g4, bishop g3, so you're never dealing with this pawn. I've got rook e7. In case you start calculating tactics here, guys, I promise you they're going to work for white. That's just the way chess works. Rook e7, queen b5. Ding is putting the finishing touches on what is a absolute, you know, vice grip that he has on the position. Queen e3, and at this point we've got rook e8, d8 moves coming, rook c2. The knight is not even in the game. The bishop hasn't been doing anything all game. Yeah, I've said enough. Bishop d6, and in time pressure, Gukesh plays f6, which leads Ding to play this rather nice rook takes g7 finishing move, of course with the idea of, yes, playing queen e7, taking this rook. You could just take the rook with the bishop. You can make another queen. It's, at this point, like, every single move is just completely over. So really nice finish there. Even if you don't take the bishop, you've got a queen. It's over. It's completely over here, guys. So rook takes g7. A beautiful finish, of course, but what about the game? Beautiful finish on a beautiful game. Ding came out Honestly, it looked like he was kind of repeating the opening that Gukesh had against him last game, so I thought that was very funny. But where does that leave us now? First of all, we have a rest day tomorrow, so both players get a chance to sit back and go, okay, what the heck just happened? We have a tied match again. There's only 2 games remaining, okay? Which means both of these players are going to get a shot with the white pieces again. The last 2 games, last 2 victories that we saw were both with white. So I think that's quite meaningful. Now, about the match, a lot of what I've been saying about this match has come true. Do I still feel like this match will end before tie breaks? Yeah, honestly, I'll stand by that. I just think every single game they play, there is an advantage on the table to be claimed by someone. We saw a couple games, and look, it's a long match, right? Over all those games, you're telling me there's not going to be a couple that are just uneventful draws? Of course there should be. Of course there should be. But no, we've got a lot of exciting and interesting games played out and a ton of advantages on the table unclaimed by both of these players. Lots of points left out there. So I think the last 2 games are going to be more of that, right? We still have lots to play for. They know, I mean, this is a game where they've both beaten each other twice, right? Losses can happen. So do not think that we're just walking into draw and go to tie breaks. These guys are clearly here to seize whatever they can, and they've shown that this match. Now, I ended last video by saying the worst thing you can do is count out Ding Liren. Well, I'm here to collect my dues, guys. I've watched Ding in the last match against Nepo. I've seen Ding as a player throughout the years. He's not a guy that tilts. He's not going to lose a game like last round and just show up today and just not even be there. That's not the way that Ding plays. A lot of people are critical of Ding, or not even critical, but almost worried for Ding. They see his demeanor at the board before, maybe after a win or a loss. It doesn't matter. He just kind of looks a little down on himself, a little sad. But that's just how Ding is, and he honestly perks up when he's speaking his native language as well. So who knows what that is, but I've seen Ding enough to know that that is not any indication that, you know, he's not ready to play the next game, or he's not ready to fight, or that he's ready to resign the match. So that's why I ended my last video after a phenomenal Gukesh win by saying, guys, the worst thing you can do is assume that the match is over now. And what do we see? Ding bouncing back. He needed a win. He could have got it anytime in the next 3 games. Well, why make his fans, you know, go through it at the end? Let's get this win out of the way. He gets it the very next round. Bounce back win. Incredible, really. Nerves of steel. And we have a match once again. So I'm just reminding you, Ding is just never fully out of it. The match with Nepo had so many swings back and forth with wins and losses. So it's just really the kind of player he is. Definitely someone you can't count out. And as I said, going back into it, we have a rest day tomorrow, 2 more rounds, anything to play for, truly anything. It could be the case that we end up in tie breaks. That's obviously the most likely outcome right now. But I just think that the way the match is going, the way the guys are playing, how many wins we've seen, I think we're going to see another one before the end of the match. So we'll see if that happens. But nevertheless, we have a tied match again, and there is no game tomorrow. We will have a YouTube video, so make sure to check back on the chessbrah channel for that. But the next recap will be in a couple days after we see the next round. Guys, I will see you for the next recap. Till then, see you soon.